January 6th, Alligatoah dropped Nachbeben.
Nachbeben, pass auf deine Seele auf. Yeah.
Which was a bombshell of a release in terms of how it was written, kind of the message it was portraying. If you go back and watch my reaction to it, which I did, just a couple days after it came out, you can kind of see that I didn't really understand it until thankfully you guys came and commented on the video. There's a lot of good feedback. A lot of you guys have really nice things to say, really intelligent things to say, and that got me kind of on board and motivated me to make this video that I'm recording today. Without further ado, guys, let's go. What we're going to be doing here is kind of going through the video, talking about the visuals and of course the audio and the text. So the video opens up basically with kind of this aerial shot of this like sleeping suburban town, and at first glance, I didn't notice this until after I watched it a couple of times. It's that all of the houses are exactly identical and they're lined up in a row, which is kind of creepy. It's almost a little dystopian and a little bit off, and something is weird. And so what's happening here is within the very first image of the video, Alligatoah is already giving us kind of clues to foreshadow what the actual theme is here. And we'll get into that later when we do touch on the theme. But basically, it's kind of as the music begins to play, we go right down into the street and we see our first character here, and that is Alligatoah. You see him marching through the street, kind of parading through the street quickly, dressed in what's almost like a very cartoon-esque picture of a villain. He's got this weird, pretty crazy hat and this weird outfit. And so the way he's dressed is pretty ridiculous on purpose. That could be characterized as what's called in literature a dramatic device. And basically what a dramatic device is a way for the writer to introduce the audience to a problem in a way that produces expectation. Immediately he utters 3 times this German phrase, Ich ballat. By doing that 3 times, it's evident that he is creating a repetition. A writer will use the repetition to kind of set up some cohesion within the story and introduce the theme in kind of a really obvious way. When you really peel back what Ich ballat means, we really kind of discover what the overall theme is going to be throughout the song. And ballan is kind of a slang word, most popularly used to describe the overconsumption of drugs. It could be even the overconsumption of food. But in other contexts, ballan also means shooting, literally a gun, or figuratively, like with what you say, your words. It also can mean to hustle, to work really, really hard. So throughout the first verse, he's intentionally alluding to this main theme using different contexts from the same word. It's really, really smart what he did here. So all of the phrases that he uses here with ballat include Ich baller mir den kranksten Video-Content, which refers to the social media consumption. Denn ich acker wie ein Irrer, die Kröten zu verdienen, und kann mir später Dinge leisten, so wie Burnout-Therapien. And this refers to the hustling. Ich baller hart im Arbeit oder sowas. Means you're working really, really hard until eventually you're just doing enough to make money and afford the therapy that you're going to need later in life because you've failed to pay attention to the things he's going to mention later. And then abends in der Küche mit der Psychotherapisten werde ich zum Poet. Wir reden nur in Schmähgedichten, denn ich lebe in der Beziehung mit verbalem Waffengürtel. So this one is really nice. He's saying Waffengürtel. It means gun holster. Again, referring back to ballan, but in this case, the figurative sense with verbal arguments. He feels like he's always under fire, and he's in this relationship that is, in simple terms, could be described as toxic. And so he's quite literally shooting verbal accusations back and forth with, his partner or whoever he's with. The verse closes with this one line. Diese Fratzenbüscher Kommentare sind meine guten Nachlektoren und dann in die Tasten prügen, als würde ich für Wachen üben. 11. So thematically he brings this verse to a really satisfying end. We finish this part with the sin we actually started with. Overconsumption of social media, tied neatly together with multiple word plays on toxic Facebook comments being, in a funny way, a good night lecture, and how one responds by aggressively mashing the keys of a keyboard, or in German, Tastenprügen, as if this person would be preparing for the heavy metal outdoor festival called Wacken, from which I understand Alligatoah has been a performer at in the past. In the literal sense, actually, Tastenprügen, mashing the keys aggressively and violently in reference to a piano or a keyboard. Someone would do at a crazy concert, right? As the hook begins, we see in the video an elaboration of the initial dramatic device as he uses chains to pull the beds out of the safe, eerily identical homes during the night into the cold tundra and begins to stomp on them. This is a beautiful depiction of what we eventually realize is the relationship between what he mentioned in the first verse as, you know, too much social media consumption combined with toxic relationships. Further, the hook describes what can be classified as emotional suppression in psychology. We pretend that we are tough, as unser Kopf sind auf Stahl, and so we unknowingly subject ourselves to things we think we can handle, but in the end, as he describes, our hearts are made of porcelain, and this leads to inevitable trauma in years to come. Again, this kind of delayed result that during this kind of experiment that he's talking about that we're a part of, we don't really realize what's going on until actually we're hit with the worst part of it. As we go into part 2, Alligatoah uses this repetition method again to prepare us for what's to come. And so the phrase he repeats 3 times here is ich drück. Again, has multiple meanings, just like ich ballert. This word can either mean to push or press, it can mean stress or pressure, as well as to squeeze. His first line is ich drück den Knopf Hiroshima. In English, this simply just means I push the button, Hiroshima. The button pushing analogy is in reference to Hiroshima and the Americans' nuclear bombing to end World War II. So infamously, the dropping of the bomb created generations of trauma for the citizens that have lost, loved ones, and can be acknowledged even today. Something the Americans at that time, when pushing that button, could not have foreseen, the consequences, the generational consequences, so like 70 years later. Alligatoah does something really cool here, and he's drawing this comparison almost as a warning to take a look at history for what could be expected in the future. And that is warning us as from this current social experiment that we're all taking part in. Pushing this harmless button, or so seemingly harmless button that, as we are beginning to see, is, its introduction is tightly correlated with, the rise and spike of anxiety and depression in pretty much people of all ages. Push, push, ich scroll ein Jahrhundertenbruchteil eine Sekunde ins Unterbewusstsein. Interessieren sich auch für Stricke und Leiter. Klicken Sie weiter. Zu Hause ist die Stimmung wie im Führerbunker. Gift, environmental stress and pressure like that at home and even at work. In the final act of the song, he goes into what life may be for those participating in the experiment. Again, using another literary device. A soliloquy is basically when the protagonist speaks their thoughts aloud, which gives the audience kind of insights on how they're feeling or reacting to the events that the story has been telling thus far. And so this particular soliloquy: Trotz einem Leben voller Folterszenen habe ich keine Schulgefäden, Folgeschäden. Nur in den Nachten muss man manchmal einen Achsen zucken, egal. So, which calls back the overarching theme of emotional suppression and the denial of post-traumatic stress symptoms, such as outbursts or tics. The protagonist is basically trying to convince themselves that they don't have Folgeschaden, or resulting damages in English. And we see this because they kind of misspoke and just utter this like gibberish word that doesn't exist, and it's Schulgeschaden or something like that, inadvertently proving the state of their fractured and damaged mind. And he closes the final part by referring to a line in part 2, nur noch 630 Jahre bis zum Renteneintritt, explaining for how many retiring is the sole motivation for work in the first place. Sad. And follows up here with dabei dachte ich, dass ich mein Leben zum Guten wand, doch bin wutentbrannt im Unruhestand. Ist so. Ich so, vorbei ist vorbei, juckt. Meine Zähler so, Einspruch. Very, very heavy words here. And the final 2 lines can be categorized as another soliloquy. In this case, the traumatized, overworked, and exhausted retiree is trying to rationalize their regret by deferring responsibility to basically anything other than themselves, such as, that's just how life is. Vorbei ist vorbei. But can really feel deep down in their soul that it's wrong. Deep in their subconscious, these suppressed emotions, right, are kind of raging and screaming to be let free. And we end again with this suburban aerial shot, this time in the morning, kind of symbolizing the cycle that we get caught in by actually closing the video with this herd type imagery we began with. So what does this all mean? And to say that the whole song is just about trauma is probably a little too superficial. And to Alligatoah's credit, I think it's intentional. And we learned that this trauma he's referring to in particular, because there are many sorts of trauma, is in reference to a cycle that most developed societies are actually suffering from today. Overconsumption of food, drugs, sex, and more recently, social media, kind of to just compound everything. But what do these all have in common? I mean, they're all tied to a naturally occurring reward system in the brain that releases dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter that helps us feel pleasure. I mean, this is the result of natural selection, carefully crafting a biological mechanism over hundreds of thousands of years, basically to ensure that we hunt and provide for our fellow human beings, reproduce, and ensure our species longevity. But here's the main issue. What happens in this kind of postmodern capitalistic society, in developed nations that we live in, when shelter, food, sex, and all types of other pleasures are abundantly available? And not only that, in amounts that kind of overload our reward system, effectively rewiring the way our brain works. Our biological drive was programmed to do some pretty simple things, and those do include fulfillment and actively seeking out ways to impact communities. I mean, I really think that's the essence of being a human. Spending too much time on social media takes you away from that fact. You guys should really kind of think about that and do what you want with that. Some people do quit social media. Some people just use one platform and not the other. I personally, I don't spend any more than 5 minutes on Instagram. And that's on purpose because I want to try to keep the majority of my day-to-day tasks around what I'm into. And I think everybody needs to do that. You need to find what you're passionate about. In researching for this video, in making this video, it was like a day-long process, but man, it was so fun. And I learned so much too. And I think that is really at the core of the message here of Alligatoah's song. And it's just don't get lost in the things that don't matter. Quite simply, guys. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you to everybody, first of all, who commented in the first place. That kind of, I would say that's the only reason I made this video. Ironically, thanks to the FOMO that I saw everybody was like enjoying this song in a way that I couldn't. And so I thank you guys. I thank you guys for, being active on my channel and kind of pointing out the fact that this song was so good, because I didn't see that in the first watch. Anyway, guys, subscribe to my channel, please. That's like the biggest way you could help me. Also, hit the like button. That's another big way you could help me. But ultimately, appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.